Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I like to discuss how the government's ambitious aims for more sustainable farming are being blighted by that most Tory of Tory speed bumps, the complete lack of a coherent plan. Are the farmers getting it yet? That this government have no regard for them at all. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So initially, Brexiteers in the Conservative Party promised that leaving the EU wouldn't mean the loss of farming subsidies because the government would just cover the costs. Then they said that, oh no, we're not going to cover the cost, but we'll replace it with something. Years later, we're still waiting for what that something is. The situation facing farmers right now is that their subsidies are being phased out aggressively over the next few years to the point where they won't exist. The Australia trade deal will result in Britain being flooded with cheaper, lower quality intensively farmed produce, and British farmers are struggling to sell their higher quality produce to single market countries who might like them because of the trade barriers we have erected between us. The outcome is set to be quite dire. But the government reckon they see a future for British farming, got this vision you see, that means more sustainable methods. And it sounds great in practice, and I actually mean that. The idea is to rewild a large area of land, cut down on the use of fertilisers, restore peatland. That wouldn't half help avoid the flooding that we keep getting. Aims like this you could really get on board with. However, there are a couple of small problems. First is that this form of farming, in terms of producing food, will be incredibly inefficient. The quality will be good, no doubt about that, but the fact of the matter is that we already cannot provide enough food. The reason why food prices are rocketing right now is because we did benefit from ready access in the single market, and now we've made it more difficult and expensive to import the food that we need. At the same time, we have also cut ourselves off from labour in the food supply chain in every link from farm to table. And so we actually need to import even more food than we ever did before. Moves like this will mean producing even less of our own food, which we've already been doing. We've already had to cut down on the amount of food we can produce. And don't imagine that the government have some cunning plan here. This is typical of how Conservatives operate these days. They strip national assets for personal profit and then leave us vulnerable to what they call global pressures. Oh, it's not our fault, global pressures, right? Take the energy crisis, for example. The cost is increasingly massively, as I think I've discussed earlier today. I think I did. But anyway, the point is that the government are blaming global pressures. Oh, it's global pressures. And that is the nominal reason. But global pressures happen all the time. The government is supposed to plan ahead to protect us from these events. And past governments did that in the form of gas reserve storage. We produce a lot of our own energy using gas because it's the cleaner of the fossil fuels. In 2017, the government got rid of it. Waste of time, waste of money, we're not having that. So the second you have some international monkeying about with gas supplies, we used to be able to manage for a bit because we had reserves. A bit like putting some money aside for a rainy day. But getting rid of it meant we are instantly affected by these global pressures. What is happening with farming? But exactly the same thing. These aims have a number of genuine and important benefits if they can be delivered, but they also result in less food being produced in Britain and therefore a greater reliance on imports. And our newly isolated status does not help us when we are more dependent upon imports, for which global pressures could also impact supply. But that's just the first problem. That's the issue of the government. You know, if it knew what it was doing, that would still be a problem. But there is a second problem. You may have noticed me referring to these schemes as aims and not plans. And the reason for that is there isn't a plan. And this isn't like dealing with trade barriers. Some people keep asking why the government didn't plan for the customs and standards checks and paperwork that would be needed as a result of a hard Brexit. They had years to prepare and plan. Other countries in the EU prepared and planned for it. Why didn't we? Well, the reason was it would draw a rather large amount of attention to the damage that Brexit was going to cause when they still needed people to potentially vote in another general election to get it over the line. As it happens, they needed people to do that twice. But this farming plan wouldn't have been like that. You could sell many of the features of these aims as highly beneficial. There was no political harm that I could see in genuinely spending the years since 2016 in planning the whole exercise out. Yet here we are in 2022, 5.5 years later, and this plan doesn't exist still. Yet the process has begun. The farming subsidies have already been phased out. Reports of a parliamentary inquiry has described the scheme as being fueled by blind optimism. That's how farmers are describing it. It's just blind optimism. You have these aims and no plan behind them. Yes, that sounds about right for anything Boris Johnson touches. Of course, this isn't just a consequence of having Boris Johnson as Prime Minister directly, because it would be DEFRA, the minister in charge of DEFRA, who would deal with the details. But because Boris Johnson has largely filled his cabinets with vacuous toadies, most departments are run by incompetent airheads. MPs have been pointing out that DEFRA, which is the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, has been missing deadline after deadline for revealing its plans. The head of DEFRA is one George Eustace. He is called George Useless for a reason. And this seems to me to be not unlike observing a load of builders randomly cementing bricks together whilst they're still waiting for the architectural plans. The EU Common Agricultural Policy is gone in Britain now. It's gone. But we still haven't replaced it with anything other than vague aims without a plan. And the question I want to ask is, are farmers getting it yet? An actual Conservative MP on the committee said this, direct quote, We have known we were replacing the Common Agricultural Policy since 2016 and still we see no clear plans, objectives or communications with those at the sharp end, farmers, in this multi-billion-pound radical overhaul of the way land is used and, more crucially, food is produced in this country. That is from a Conservative MP, Sir Geoffrey Clifton Brown, a fully paid up member of the Brexit Brigade. Can you imagine what those who are opposed to both the Conservatives and Brexit must be thinking of all this? And we see this throughout our post-Brexit future. We don't have a plan. The government arranged the Northern Ireland Protocol but didn't really want it, but there's no plan. The plan was to simply torch it after we left, but that went wrong. We deliberately left the customs union single market, even though that was not a condition in the Leave campaign, but we had no plan to deal with it either. We cut ourselves off from the supply of workers in key industries with no plan to manage, even in the long term. The government say we need to close the skills gap. That's true, absolutely, but there's no plan for it. And here we are, a nation that has been dependent upon food imports since well beyond living memory, producing even less of our own food and signing trade deals that will undercut our own producers in our own market, and we have no plan for any of it. Are people getting it yet? Are farmers getting it yet? It doesn't matter whether you think there is no plan because they're incompetent or because they don't care. It doesn't matter which it is. The outcome is the same. And the outcome will continue to be the same until they are removed from power. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.